Live from New York City, Making Money with Charles Payne presents a town hall exploring the national discussion on capitalism versus socialism. Here's your moderator, Charles Payne.
What's up? You get a car, I want a Bentley. You got it.
Charles,
Herman,
good to see you.
Richard, hey, thank you all very much. Good, thank you all very much. Hello, everyone, and thanks for being here. This is a very special edition of Making Money. In fact, it's our first for Fox Business, a town hall on capitalism and socialism. Now, we're going to get to the questions from our live studio audience in just a minute, but let's meet the folks answering those questions. First, taking up the virtues of socialism, Bianca Cunningham. Bianca is the co-chair of the New York City Democratic Socialists of America. In 2014, she was a retail worker at Verizon Wireless store in Brooklyn. She organized her co-workers to form the first ever union for Verizon Wireless workers. With her, you know this man. Richard Wolff, he has taught economics since 1967 at universities around the world, including Yale and the University of Paris. His most recent book is called Capitalism's Crisis Deepens. And here to champion capitalism is the man himself, Herman Cain. He is the former CEO of Godfather's Pizza, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve of Kansas City, and he ran for president in 2012. You might remember that. Well, did you know he started from humble beginnings? He grew up in Georgia in the 40s and 50s. And finally, my man, we are joined by Fox Business's very own Stuart Varney, host of the top market show on television, Varney & Company, at 9 p.m. in New York, on this network, rather. And if you watch his show, you know that Stuart likes to say that he is, quote, a refugee of European socialism. Yes. He came to America decades ago, and he's never looked back. Now, throughout today's town hall, other Fox business stars will be joining us to speak candidly about the state of capitalism and the American dream. Neil Cavuto's coming, Kennedy's coming, Lou Dobbs, and of course, we've got great questions lined up from our audience. But before we get to that, the question right now, why are we doing this town hall and why now? Jackie DeAngelis is here, and she's got those answers. Jackie.
Good afternoon to you, Charles. Capitalism versus socialism. There is more at stake now than ever. But do people who look at socialism and ask for it, do they know what it means?
As the election looms, a national debate is raging. On one side, capitalism, free market economy, the individual creation of wealth.
Here in the United States, we are alarmed by the new calls to adopt socialism in our country.
On the other side, socialism, government control of enterprise, wealth shared by all.
Democratic socialism, to me, is creating a government and an economy and a society which works for all rather than just the top 1%.
According to a new Gallup poll, 47% of Americans say they would vote for a qualified presidential candidate who is a socialist.
It means putting democracy and society first instead of capital first.
Democrats are embracing the same tired economic theories that have impoverished nations and stifled the liberties of millions.
So who's right? Would America and the American people do better embracing a society based on socialism instead of capitalism? That question may be on the ballot in 2020. And Fox Business is exploring that today with this town hall.
Charles, let's get some answers.
Let's get them. Thanks so much, Jackie. And the audience, well, they've got a lot of questions for this group. So let's start with Alex, who is in school. Alex, what's your question?
How can we call our country great or our society moral when a small number of wealthy people have far more money that could ever be required to live a comfortable life, while several people lack basic human rights such as housing, health care, or even food?
Alex, great question. I want to start with Herman Cain. Herman, I think you've been on both sides of that equation.
Alex, I first reject your assumptions. The assumption that a lot of people are not able to pursue the so-called American dream. I am an example. I started when I was very poor, and because I was willing to take risks, I was willing to invest sweat equity, I was willing to change jobs multiple times, I was able to climb up the corporate ladder. So I reject your hypothesis that only a few people. Secondly, the thing about rich people that a lot of people don't know and a lot of people don't talk about if they are socialists is that when rich people have a lot of money, do you know they spend a large percentage of their time trying to figure out how to give it away to causes that they like, not causes that the government likes.
Bianca, but you worked at Verizon.
Yes.
You felt it was an unfair system. And so you did something about it, and you think there's only one way to really right this, and that's through a socialistic society, right?
Yeah, as socialists, we believe in putting the power back in the hands of everyday Americans, taking away from the few at the top that have means to control the agenda for the rest of us in this country. We want a government that's for the people, by the people, truly.
What would you say to Herman in the sense that he started out in the 1940s in Georgia? We know what the circumstances were like. And he was able to propel himself to a place. Does that not exist anymore for someone your age?
I believe that millennials are entering a really difficult economic system. I congratulate Mr. Herman for his successes, but I do think that people shouldn't have to put their safety and security at risk in order to achieve the American dream.
Allow me to respond to that, please, because that's another fallacy in the thinking. Never in the history of the world has a socialist model worked. I don't care which one. Okay? Now, allow me to give one example. Most people want to point to Venezuela and then they're in denial. They want to point to Cuba and they're in denial. Have you ever heard of the USSR, United Soviet Socialist Republic? They tried socialism for 70 years and it failed.
Right.
And when they finally figured it out, the 15 countries went their separate ways.
Richard, though, you've taught all over the world. I mean, have you seen examples of socialism working?
Absolutely. The biggest and most important ones we can think about. He referred to the United Soviet Socialist Republics. That's not correct. It's called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Oh, it's all right. It's not a big mistake. But the big one is not to understand what socialist societies have grown. We are currently, as a nation, in a big fight, an ugly fight initiated by President Trump against China. As you know, tariff wars, one after a big company today. That's a big effect. Why? Because China is the second most important economy in the world.
What was the first most important?
Just a second. 40 years ago, China was one of the poorest countries in the world. It used a very powerful socialist economic model to do one thing: to grow quickly, to stop being poor, and to become wealthy. They did a lot of things along the way I don't agree with, and you don't. But if you want, let me finish. If you want an example of rapid economic growth, then that is the example of our lifetime.
China took off when they assumed capitalist connotations. They took off when, I can't remember the name of the leader, who said, let 1,000 flowers bloom. And the 1,000 flowers were capitalist enterprises. And that's when China started to bloom. Have you been teaching kids in our schools this nonsense?
I've been teaching kids a bit longer than you've been talking on TV, but roughly, you know what I'm saying. Let me just respond.
Yeah, let's get everyone in and keep the conversation going.
I want to respond to Alex's question.
Sure.
Because what you were really asking about was income inequality. And I'm sure that's what upsets you about our society today. I have a different view of income inequality. I think it's a good thing that you allow some people, by their own brains, drive, talent and ability, to become rich. The more rich people, yes, it is. The more rich people you allow, the more growth in your economy, the more innovation, the more efficiency, and the greater prosperity. Can I just have 30 seconds? I'm an example of that. I got rich in the 1990s by investing in stocks. I got rich, I then got out and put that money into real estate in California, bought dozens of houses, did them up, rented them out, made a profit, took that money, put it into land. I now run a large tree farm. I don't know what you're laughing at, young man, but you can learn something. I invested in land. I've now got a profitable tree farm, employs people in a very depressed area. And now, with my wealth that I made by myself, I'm looking after 6 kids and 9 grandchildren, and I'm not looking for anything off you.
Let's hold it right there. We actually have another audience member named Alex, and we're going to go to him for his question. So go ahead, Alex.
So many of the policies we pursue and label as socialist in America are called by the more accurate term of social democracy in Europe. I was wondering, how do you think this rhetorical difference has stunted our ability to discuss effective policy and even have a rational conversation about economics?
You know, Richard, I'll pose that to you because what you're not even talking about democratic socialism. You're talking about Chinese-style socialism, which includes 1 million Muslims who are now in concentration camps and, you know, stifling of free press. surveillance society that will be 1984 as soon as you look around the corner. There's so many nuances. We've heard now inclusive capitalism, progressive capitalism, socialism. What socialism do you think it is that will work in this country? Because now we're hearing a variety from all these presidential candidates.
I didn't endorse Chinese socialism. I just corrected it. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm helping you here. What I'm doing was showing you that the statement that this kind of an economy can't create economic wealth and develop a mass of people in a quick time is wrong. That's what China did. Whatever else you like or don't about that society, rapid economic growth, which is one of the great goals of most people on this planet, was achieved at a faster rate than in the United States. Let me just finish this point. Over the last 20 years, so we're not talking a short amount of time, the average annual increase in output in the People's Republic of China was in the neighborhood of 10 to 10.5%. Over the same period of time, the average annual growth of output in this country was somewhere around 3%. It's not even close, and that has to be a reality you face unless you're living in a fantasy world where what you would prefer becomes the fact.
I want to bring Bianca in, but we should also put it in proper perspective. If I got a quarter in my pocket and I find a quarter, I double what I have in my pocket, up 100%. If I got 20 bucks in my pocket and I find a quarter, I'm up a few percentage points. We started at a much higher base. God bless America that we have. Bianca, do you think then this is a race to get to a certain place? And if it is, would you be willing to give up freedom of press, that comes along with a lot of these Soviet or socialist-style economies, the democracy? A lot of them involve ultimately dictatorships. One leader, one political party. Would you be willing to give all of those things up for a tighter income inequality?
So socialism is an old term with a bad rep, in my opinion. It predates Marx. I'm part of the largest and fastest growing socialist organization in the country, the Democratic Socialists of America. And what we mean by socialism is that in a country with so much excess, it's not equitable that some people are starving. It's not right that families have to make a decision between putting food in the fridge or buying prescription drugs. And what we're trying to move towards is a model that works for all of us, not a few at the top.
Do you ever wonder where the excess came from?
It's the workers.
How was it created?
The workers.
It was created.
Yeah, I hear him saying, I did this and I did that. The wealth was created by the workers. You cannot create that wealth on your own.
Yes, madam, I did.
Yeah.
I did.
And the workers are entitled to the wealth that they create.
And I've still got it.
May I respond to something that she said? I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I don't buy your argument that you got people who don't have food to eat and they don't have shelter. You want to know why? There are homeless shelters and food banks all over downtown Atlanta that some homeless people choose not to go to. So you think the government is going to come? You think the government is going to come in and use its clout in order to take from the rich and give to the poor? That doesn't work.
I just want to push back on something right now. I mentor in New York City public schools, and I can tell you that the schools that I mentor in, almost 65% of the kids are homeless. When given $2,000 as a project to say, what should we spend money on, they're asking for a community garden so that they can bring food home. They're asking for rooms so that they can sleep overnight in because they're afraid of sleeping on the streets with their parents. People are dealing with real issues, and your claim that people are not homeless or going without is just false.
Well, your claim is also false. I grew up taking biscuits to school for lunch with no meat. So don't talk to me about people coming to school who don't have food and this and that. It's available if they go out and work for it like everybody else works for it. Now, let me give you one
second, Herman, let me... One second. No. Let me bring Stuart in for 1 second because Stuart actually came from the UK, where there was a sort of a command and control.
There was.
Right. And
yeah,
so you've lived both differences, Stuart.
Let me respond to Alex's question here, because that's a valid question. And yes, I do want a rational conversation about things. But I also want to talk the truth. European socialism does not work. And I'm an example of that. In the 1970s, that was when I was in England. I don't know why you're laughing, Sunshine, but I'm telling you, when I was in England in the 1970s, the coal industry, steel industry, rail industry, gas industry, road transportation, what else have we got here? Oh, electricity, healthcare, all of that, and the airlines owned and run by the government. And they ran it into the ground. That was English socialism. It failed miserably. I come here and I find a capitalist society where you can work your way up the food chain with brains, drive, talent and ability. And by the way, it was Margaret Thatcher, a capitalist, who restored England to prosperity after the degradation of socialism in the 1970s. First, you're still laughing. I don't know why.